If you've ever slid a gray cartridge into an old NES, waited for the screen to flicker on, and heard that eerie music begin to play, then chances are you faced Castlevania, a piece of childhood that never quite left. The journey of Simon Belmont, whip in hand and courage in his blood, captivated generations of gamers. Dark corridors, relentless bosses, and the unmistakable click-click of the controller buttons still echo in the memories of many. But have you ever stopped to ask, what's the real story behind the game? Why does Dracula always return? And who is Belmont truly? Let us step together into the Castle of Shadows. Through bloodied halls and cursed illusions, past monsters and death itself, until we stand face to face with the fear that dwells within. Castlevania, Curse of the Night. This is not just a game. It is a legend told in blood, steel, and moonlight. Chapter 1. Darkness Returns. The cold wind howled through the ancient Carpathian forests, rustling the dead leaves that lined the stone paths of the forgotten village of Veros. Shadows danced under the flickering lamplight, and villagers locked their doors early, whispering prayers against unseen forces. Something in the air had shifted. The animals had grown restless. Children cried without reason. The old remembered, and the young began to fear. On the night of the crimson moon, a sound tore through the mountains, a low, thunderous hum that rose into a bone-chilling howl. Beneath Castle Dracula's long-ruined foundation, the earth split open. Fire erupted from the cracks, and smoke spiraled like a serpent into the sky. The ruins of Castlevania, long believed to be buried and broken, trembled as stones levitated and ancient magic crackled like lightning across the mountaintop. And then it rose. The castle, with its spires jagged like the fangs of a beast, reformed before the eyes of those who dared to look. Stained glass windows blinked with cursed light. The drawbridge fell with a thunderous echo. The gates yawned wide. Within, the throne room once again pulsed with unholy life. Dracula, Vlad Tepes, Lord of the Night, had returned. No one summoned him. No ritual called him back. Evil, by its nature, does not wait for permission. It awakens when mankind grows too confident, too comfortable. It rises when the world begins to forget. And so it did. In the heart of the village, an old priest trembled as he pulled an ancient tome from beneath the altar. His lips whispered names lost to time: Leon, Trevor, Christopher, and Simon, the Belmonts, the only bloodline cursed and blessed to fight the darkness. He lit a beacon fire atop the chapel. Its smoke carried eastward, curling toward the forest where a lone warrior trained in silence. That man's name was Simon Belmont. Chapter 2. The Belmont Heir. Deep within the woods bordering Veros, hidden beneath a canopy of gnarled oaks, stood a solitary cabin. Moss crept along its stone base, and ivy clung to its wooden beams. A simple structure, humble in size, but ancient in lineage. For this was the home of Simon Belmont, heir to a cursed legacy and bearer of the sacred whip, Vampire Killer. Simon was no ordinary man. Towering, broad-shouldered, with a mane of chestnut hair tied behind his head, He carried in his veins the blood of warriors sworn to hunt the darkness. His youth had not been filled with the laughter of boys or the comforts of family. Instead, it had been shaped by brutal training, sacred rituals, and nightly drills with the whip that struck like thunder and echoed with purpose. He bore scars, not all of them visible. His father, Julius Belmont, had fallen on the battlefield when Simon was a child. The burden of the Belmont name passed to him far too soon, along with the responsibility no man should ever bear alone. That night, as the beacon fire from the village licked the sky, Simon awoke with a start. He felt it before he saw it, the shift in the air, the pressure of something ancient pressing against his chest. He stepped outside and looked toward the mountains. Above the blackened treetops, he saw it. Castlevania, standing once more like a dagger aimed at heaven. So, it was time. Inside his home, Simon opened a locked chest and removed the whip, coiled, leather-bound, and lined with silver. It throbbed faintly in his grasp, as if recognizing its master and the blood it was destined to spill. Next, he donned his gear, leather armor reinforced with chainmail, a cross around his neck, and pouches filled with holy water, throwing axes, and small vials of sacred oil. At the door stood an old man, Father Reginald, the priest from Veros. "You feel it too," the priest said. Simon nodded. "Dracula walks again." "There is no one else, Simon. The others are gone. The Belmont line ends with you." "Then I will finish it," Simon replied, his voice steady, but his eyes distant. The priest handed him a scroll, old, brittle, marked with the family crest. "The castle is different every time. It shifts, it deceives. Trust your instincts, not your eyes." Simon tucked the scroll into his belt and offered a brief nod of thanks. He set out that same hour, disappearing into the woods like a shadow returning to its source. The road ahead was long, and the night was hungry. But Simon Belmont did not waver. The fate of humanity rested on the whip in his hand and the courage in his heart. Chapter 3: A Solitary Journey. Simon's boots crunched over frost-covered soil as he left behind the woods of Veros. The road to Castlevania was no ordinary path. It twisted and wound through haunted glades, past forgotten ruins and ancient cemeteries where the dead did not rest quietly. The first night was silent, save for the occasional howl of wolves, natural ones for now. The forest grew denser. Trees arched like cathedral ceilings, their branches bare and reaching like skeletal fingers. Moonlight filtered through the canopy in thin beams, casting illusions of movement in every corner. Simon pressed forward. By dawn, the land began to rot. The ground squelched beneath his boots. Graves, once buried deep, were cracked open. Bones jutted out of disturbed soil. The scent of decay thickened the air. He knew he was drawing near. Evil left marks wherever it lingered. It wasn't long before the first ambush. From the fog came 3 figures, shambling, broken, their flesh pale and torn. Undead. Their hollow eyes fixed on Simon, drawn to his living heartbeat like moths to flame. One lunged, mouth open wide. With a crack like a whip of thunder, Vampire Killer lashed forward. The zombie's skull caved in. its body dissolving into ash before it even hit the ground. Simon spun, the whip dancing in deadly arcs, each strike guided by muscle memory and purpose. Within seconds, the other two fell. The air grew colder. Later, in a clearing surrounded by crumbling statues of forgotten saints, Simon found a broken shrine. He paused there to pray, not just for strength, but for clarity. For the Belmonts, faith was not about worship, it was about resolve. Evil fed on doubt. A pure heart, unshaken, was the greatest weapon of all. Suddenly, a shriek echoed from above. A massive bat descended, its eyes glowing red, wings spanning nearly 10 feet. It wasn't just a beast, it was cursed, malformed by dark magic. It swooped toward Simon, talons outstretched. He rolled aside, drew a vial from his belt, and hurled it. The holy water shattered against the ground, erupting into blue flames. The bat shrieked again as fire licked its wings. Before it could recover, Simon leapt, driving his whip through its chest. The creature burst into smoke and bone. Breathing heavily, Simon stood alone among scorched stone and silence. One beast down, countless more to go. Chapter 4. The Gates of Hell. The path soon narrowed into a jagged pass carved between two black cliffs. The air was unnaturally still, heavy like a held breath. Simon paused. Ahead, cloaked in curling mist and shadow, stood the massive front gates of Castlevania. They loomed 30 feet high, wrought from iron scorched black by time and curse. Upon their surface were carved twisted figures, demons, screaming souls, serpents coiled around crucifixes. Some said the gates had been made from the melted weapons of fallen saints. Others whispered they were forged from the bones of Dracula's enemies. Simon took a breath and stepped forward. With a metallic groan, the gates parted without touch. The mist rolled inward, swallowing him whole. He entered. Inside, the air was colder still. A wide stone hall stretched out before him, flanked by pillars shaped like weeping angels. Red light filtered through stained glass, painting blood-colored streaks across the floor. The silence was broken only by the sound of his footsteps echoing through the cavernous gloom. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut behind him. The hall pulsed, walls shifted, ceiling stretched upward, as though the castle itself were alive and breathing. It was. Castlevania was not a structure of stone alone. It was bound to Dracula's will, a living labyrinth that shifted and mutated to torment and mislead invaders. Simon pressed onward, ignoring the sense of wrongness in the air. He passed portraits whose eyes followed him, suits of armor that trembled when he neared. Candelabras burst into flame spontaneously, casting twisted shadows that danced with silent menace. Then, from the end of the corridor, a shape emerged. Tall, serpentine, crowned in writhing snakes, it was Medusa, one of Dracula's guardians. Her eyes glowed green, her stare deadly. Simon turned away instinctively, knowing a direct gaze would mean petrification. She hissed, hurling a wave of magical energy that shattered the floor near his feet. Simon ducked behind a column, pulled a throwing axe and launched it without looking. It struck her shoulder. She screamed, enraged, and slithered forward in a blur. Her tail swept the corridor, breaking stone and metal alike. Simon ran, then rolled forward at the last second, sliding beneath her strike. He spun and cracked the vampire killer across her back. She roared and turned. 1 second, that's all he needed. He threw a vial of holy water. It shattered at her feet. Blue fire ignited her serpentine body. She screamed again, this time not in rage, but agony. As she writhed in flame, Simon whipped again and again. Her form collapsed into black dust and smoking embers. The hall was silent once more. Simon stood alone amid ruin. One guardian defeated. The castle would only grow more dangerous from here. But he had no intention of stopping. Chapter 9. The Clockwork of Death. Beyond the ruined corridor, Simon entered a grand chamber filled with the incessant ticking of gears and chimes. Towering clock faces stared from the walls like eyes, and the sound of metal grinding against metal echoed through the space. He had reached the clock tower, a place of maddening precision and mechanical cruelty. The floors shifted, pendulums swung like guillotines. Gears the size of wagons spun slowly, threatening to crush anything in their path. It was a deadly machine built not for timekeeping, but for killing. Simon leapt onto a moving gear, then to a chain that climbed into the heights of the tower. Each movement had to be perfect. One misstep, and he would plummet into the abyss below. Halfway up, he spotted them, harpy-like creatures with razor talons and wings of iron. They shrieked and dove toward him. Simon swung from a chain and lashed his whip mid-air, striking one from the sky. It tumbled down, shattering on the gears below. 2 more followed. Simon climbed swiftly, throwing a cross-shaped blade that spun through both harpies before returning to his hand like a boomerang. Their bodies exploded into black feathers and ash. He reached a platform and leapt, only to find himself face to face with a man cloaked in robes of midnight. Pale, gaunt, holding a scythe whose blade shimmered like moonlight. Death. Not a metaphor, not a servant. The Grim Reaper himself, Dracula's right hand. Simon had no time to speak. Death raised his scythe, and a storm of blades shot through the air. Simon dodged left, right, rolled forward, every movement a dance against death itself. The room spun with deadly arcana as spectral skulls circled the chamber, moaning with the voices of the damned. Simon gritted his teeth, hurled a bottle of holy water, but death vanished in a blink and reappeared behind him. The scythe swung, nicking Simon's shoulder. Blood flew, pain seared. But Simon retaliated with a strike of the vampire killer, charged with divine force. The whip cracked across Death's robe, splitting the shadowy fabric and revealing the hollow nothing within. Death screamed, an inhuman, echoing sound. He summoned a vortex of skulls. Simon fell to one knee, pulled his last vial of sacred oil, and poured it over the whip. "Belmont," Death hissed, "your blood is wasted on hope." Simon didn't reply. He stood, whipped the vortex, and broke through it with one final strike to Death's chest. Light exploded. Death disintegrated in a howl of fury, and the chamber fell still. The gears stopped. The clock no longer ticked. Simon staggered, wounded but standing. Another of Dracula's most powerful servants destroyed. But his journey was far from over. Chapter 6: Mirror of Illusion. Wounded but unbroken, Simon descended from the now silent clock tower into a long corridor lit by torches that burned with unnatural green flames. The walls shimmered strangely, and his reflection flickered unnaturally in every polished surface. This was the Hall of Mirrors, a place of warped space, illusion, and deceit. No map could guide him here. No sense of direction would hold true. Dracula had built this wing of the castle not with stone and mortar, but with nightmare and misdirection. At first, it was subtle. Simon walked down a hall only to find himself where he began. He turned right, but the world twisted left. Statues moved when he wasn't looking. Reflections in mirrors showed not only himself, but someone following him, just out of frame. He moved carefully, eyes sharp, heart steady. Then the mirrors began to whisper. Voices from his past, his father, his comrades, the faces of villagers he had failed to save in younger days. Even his own reflection spoke, lips moving in mockery. "You are alone," it said. "The Belmont line ends with your corpse." Simon smashed the glass with his whip. From the shards, a figure emerged, a perfect copy of Simon, forged from illusion and malice. It smiled with his mouth, wielded a whip that crackled with shadow, and moved with his precision. The doppelganger lunged. The battle was fast, brutal. Every strike Simon landed was matched, every move predicted. But this creature lacked one thing: soul. It mimicked skill, not spirit. Simon fainted, then dropped to one knee, an opening his enemy copied. But the real Simon didn't rise. Instead, he rolled, flanked, and struck low. The whip coiled around the doppelganger's leg. With a twist, Simon yanked, unbalancing the clone. He rose and brought the vampire killer down with full force. The illusion shattered like crystal. The mirrors all around him cracked, and for the first time in the hall, Simon saw nothing but his own true reflection. He exhaled. The mind games were over. But the path ahead? Only darker. He found a door beyond the last mirror. Carved in it was a single word, in a language he did not know, but instinctively understood. Sanctuary of Blood. Chapter 7: The Monster and His Maker. The door groaned open, revealing a vast underground chamber lit by torches sunk into bone-crafted sconces. The walls were slick with crimson stains, the air thick with the coppery scent of blood. Chains clinked somewhere in the dark, and something massive breathed in the shadows. Simon stepped forward, his boots sticking slightly to the ground with each move. In the center of the room stood a makeshift laboratory, twisted and obscene. Tables held limbs, vats bubbled with unholy fluids. Lightning flickered through wires strung along the ceiling, arcing toward a raised platform of steel. And upon that slab, it waited. A hulking figure stitched together from corpses, its skin pale and scarred. Its chest rose slowly, as if unsure it remembered how to breathe. At its side stood a twisted man in a black cloak, his eyes wild with genius and madness. His name was Igor, Dracula's mortal servant and alchemist. "You're just in time," Igor cackled, adjusting a lever. "My masterpiece has been waiting for you." With a surge of power, the slab tilted upright. Frankenstein's monster opened its eyes. It roared, a sound not of anger, but of pain, of confusion, of unnatural existence. Bolts surged through its veins, muscles twitched with terrible force. It stepped forward, each footfall shaking the floor. Simon raised the vampire killer, but the monster charged too quickly. A backhand sent him crashing into the wall. Igor howled with glee. The monster grabbed a metal pillar and hurled it like a spear. Simon rolled aside and retaliated with a holy cross, striking its chest. The monster recoiled, but not far. It kept coming. Simon didn't want to kill it, not really. He saw the pain in its eyes, the unwillingness of its soul. It was a puppet. So he aimed instead at the puppeteer. Igor didn't expect the axe. It flew through the air and struck him in the chest, sending him flying back into his own machine. Electricity surged violently, sparks flew, pipes burst. The monster screamed as the overload fried its bindings. Simon used the distraction. He hurled his last vial of holy water at Igor's console. The device exploded, engulfing the lab in flame. The monster howled once more, fell to its knees, then collapsed, unmoving. Simon knelt by it, not in victory, but in respect. "You deserved better," he whispered. The chamber behind the platform opened. It was time. Only one path remained. To the highest tower, to the throne of the damned, to Dracula. Chapter 8, Lord of the Night. Simon climbed the final staircase, each step winding higher into the heart of Castlevania's tallest tower. Thunder cracked outside, flashing light through shattered windows. Rain lashed at the stone. The wind howled as though the castle itself was warning him to turn back. But he didn't. The staircase ended at a pair of tall, ornate doors, black wood etched with silver sigils, and handles shaped like dragon jaws. As Simon placed his hand on the cold metal, a surge of dark energy pulsed through it. He pushed. The doors opened with a groan to reveal the throne room. A grand hall of crimson and obsidian. Candelabras floated mid-air, their flames blue and cold. Stained glass cast unnatural light over an impossibly long carpet that led to a blackened throne. And, seated upon it, was Dracula. Tall, pale, cloaked in red and black. His eyes glowed like embers in a dying fire. In his presence, the air seemed to vanish. Simon felt the weight of centuries pressed down on him. "Another Belmont," Dracula said, rising slowly. His voice was smooth and ancient. "How many of you must die before you learn?" Simon stepped forward. "As many as it takes." Dracula smirked. "So be it." With a blur of motion, the vampire lord vanished and reappeared mid-air, hurling orbs of darkness. Simon dove aside. The orbs exploded into pillars of shadow. He rolled, whipped upward, the vampire killer striking one and dispersing it mid-air. Dracula reformed, floating above the throne. Lightning crackled from his fingertips. A swarm of fireballs shot forth. Simon dodged left and right, hurling a throwing cross that struck Dracula in the chest. The Lord hissed and dissolved into a swarm of bats. Simon waited, listening, then spun and struck. The bats reformed just behind him, but he was faster. The whip cracked across Dracula's back, sizzling with holy light. Enraged, Dracula summoned a ring of flames and descended. The ground trembled, the stained glass shattered. He shifted, his form growing, warping. Wings tore from his back. His skin darkened. Fangs lengthened. He no longer looked like a man. He became the beast. Massive, demonic, eyes blazing with hatred. Simon knew he had only one chance. He dodged the monster's clawed swipe, slid under its legs, and struck the heart with the vampire killer. The beast roared. It grabbed him, lifted him high, but Simon plunged a silver dagger into its wrist, forcing it to drop him. One more strike. He sprinted, climbed the crumbled remains of a pillar, leapt from the top, and brought the vampire killer down with both hands. Into Dracula's heart. The castle screamed. The beast howled. The skies opened. And then all fell silent. The throne room crumbled. Stone cracked and shattered. Walls folded inward. Castlevania collapsed as if pulled into itself, swallowed by the very darkness it once summoned. Simon barely escaped through the outer halls before the structure imploded in a blaze of red light. He stood outside, soaked in rain, breathing hard. It was over. Epilogue: The Curse and the Vow. Days later, Simon returned to Veros. The skies were clearer. The dead no longer stirred. Children laughed again, and the name Belmont was spoken with reverence, not fear. But he knew it would not last. Evil never dies, it sleeps. And when it wakes, another Belmont will rise. He placed the vampire killer in its case, sealed it shut, and walked away from the cabin into the morning light. For now, the world was safe, but Simon Belmont would always be ready.